Have you ever walked away from a conversation with an uneasy feeling, thinking, that is not how I wanted that conversation to go, but you don't know what to do differently next time? When a conversation suddenly escalates or you find yourself reacting more strongly than you wanted to, there's usually something deeper happening beneath the surface. Today we're talking about something that affects so many difficult interactions, and that's our triggers. Triggers are important pieces of data in the stories that we tell ourselves. Today you'll learn what happens in the brain and body when we become emotionally triggered and why conversations can quickly move into fight or flight mode, and how you can respond more calmly and intentionally instead of reacting out of hurt, fear, or frustration. This is a follow-up to episode 37, and for this conversation, I'm joined by communication strategist Michelle Pexa as we discuss what to do when your adult child becomes triggered and how understanding what's happening emotionally can help create safer, more peaceful communication between you. This episode will help you begin to understand how emotions work and what to do when a conversation begins going off track. If you've been trusting God for reconciliation with your adult child and feeling like you keep getting stuck in difficult conversations, this episode is for you because there is a spiritual side and there's a practical side to the process of reconciliation. So grab your notebook and a pen, add some ice to your oat milk latte, and let's dive in. Hi friends, welcome to the Praying Moms of Estranged Children podcast. Are you struggling with strained relationships and losses that have shaken your faith and left you wondering where God is? If you long for peace, a deeper prayer life, and faith that holds steady, you're in the right place. I'm Sarah, a wife, mom of adult kids, and your Jesus-loving friend. Here you'll find encouragement to help you trust God and practical tools to pray with confidence as you walk closely with Him. So turn off your alarm clock, pour a strong latte, and find peace as you trust God with your children and your broken relationships. Hi friend, are you struggling to move forward while being estranged and you're feeling like estrangement has rocked your world so much that you can't figure out how to move forward and live again? I was in that same exact place. I went through all the stages of grief over and over like a never-ending cycle, moving from shock to anger to shame and helplessness. I literally tried everything that I knew of to move forward, and I still kept coming up empty-handed. I want you to know that you don't have to stay in that place of feeling stuck in the sadness and pain for another month or year of your life. It is possible to move forward, to have peace, and to live again, even if your relationship with your adult child hasn't mended yet. I know because I did this. After years of being estranged from one or both of my prodigal children, I broke free from despair. I was able to find the peace that I thought was totally impossible. My prayer life is stronger than ever, and I'm able to trust God to a much greater degree than ever before. My soul has peace. I invite you to come and learn how to trust God with your estranged relationship. All you have to do is go to the episode show notes and click the link to book a peaceful parenting call with me. Hi friends, last week for episode 37, I had Michelle Pexa, host of the Peacemaking on Purpose podcast, on my show. We started an important conversation about the hidden communication patterns that quietly create distance in our relationships, especially when we have estranged or prodigal children. Today is part 2 of that conversation. This episode picks up where we left off last time by talking about the stories we tell ourselves about the interactions that we have with our children that aren't going as we expect them to. You know, most of the time I talk about the faith side of this process of reconciliation and dealing with estrangement, but there is a practical side too in learning how to communicate and how to listen well. And there are so many gems of wisdom in this conversation, and I think you're really going to get a lot out of it. Here's Michelle.
I'd like to talk about if you do have the opportunity to have a better conversation. Do you have some of your listeners that actually are having conversations?
Yes, I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into that because it kind of goes along with the idea of some of these things trigger feelings within us and cause us to create some kind of story in our mind about what's really happening, right? How do we manage our composure when we begin to feel triggered in a conversation? And, you know, what if our child reacts and gets triggered? What do we do?
Yeah, okay. Not easy. Okay. This is the hardest stuff to do. Okay. If I'm a professional and I'm a mediator as well, and I'm mediating between two people and it's not my stuff and someone's getting triggered, hey, I can facilitate that well, as you probably were able to as a teacher or a principal, but it's your stuff. There's something at stake for you. Okay. So I just want to talk a little bit about what happens when we become triggered. Okay. So we receive information through our eyes and through our ears. So we might watch them roll their eyes at you, or we might hear them snap or say maybe something a little mean, whatever the case may be in the conversation. There's a filter in our brain that tells us what that information means to you. That's why that's where those stories come from. And again, that's a whole topic in itself as far as how that filter is formed. It might be your upbringing, or your personality, that's what you would have done, or, the culture in which you were raised. There's a whole bunch of things that contribute to that filter to tell you what information means, but you're receiving it through your ears and through your eyes, okay?
So when we get triggered, you're saying that we're taking information in through our eyes and ears, and we're making meaning out of it. And the way that we're interpreting it somehow goes against our values or how we think things should be. Is that right?
If your filter tells you that what you saw with your eyes or heard with your ears is actually threatening or opposing something that's important to you, like a core value that you have, like respect or truth, right? Or perhaps your time is worth something and they've just wasted your time. They stood you up, right? Something like that, whatever the case may be. Your brain will sound an alarm. It'll go, warning, 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 threat, threat, right? And what actually happens is your blood will begin to move from your brain to your fight or your flight muscle. So you get ready to fight or you get ready to run, okay? It becomes a physiological response, okay? What also happens, your blood is moving, you've got your stress hormones that are running through your body, epinephrine and cortisol, and all this stuff starts to move depending on how strong the threat was, or how strong the value is, or how frequently it's been going on, okay? Because sometimes you get triggered real fast, or sometimes you get triggered real strong, right? That's what happens. So it becomes a physiological trigger, but it starts with what you believed about the situation.
That makes total sense to me because some things aren't triggering, right? You can have a good conversation or what you call a good conversation and be totally fine with it, whereas other conversations will trigger something in you. And now I understand that it's a physiological reaction to you feeling like your values have been infringed upon somehow.
So I often tell people initially what happens is, have you ever seen like when people get really mad, you can actually see their faces get red? If you were to look in the mirror, that's actually your blood moving. Okay. So your blood is moving. You can see it. Sometimes veins will bulge in your forehead. When I see people's veins bulging in their forehead, I'm like, something real important's going on for them right now because it's going on for you. It's true. That's what's happening for you. And it's normal because your brain has told you to react to this. Okay. So you are physiologically triggered. The challenge is the more triggered you are, the lower your quality of judgment will be. You have a hard time reasoning. Have you ever heard the term, they're just not rational? When somebody gets really angry or upset, what happens is you get really narrow and you just start focusing on one little issue and you have a hard time hearing. So it's really not a good place to be, okay? And with our kids, it's the most important thing for a mother is relationship with your kids and the values you instilled in them and everything you believe. Of course, you're going to react when they're defying that, right? There's a lot of alarms going off at the same time.
Right. So knowing that these triggers are a physiological reaction to how we're making meaning of what's happening in the conversation, what are some things or what is something that you would suggest we do to kind of interrupt that trigger from taking over our thinking?
So what we want to do is, this is not that profound, but it's very important, okay? What I often tell people is, if this has been going on for a while, you've got to start practicing techniques when you're not triggered so that when you become triggered, you know what to do. One technique that's very important is this: breathe. Okay. What happens to people when you become triggered is you actually start to hold your breath, or we start to breathe shallow. So we can actually start to hyperventilate. That's not good. You can pass out. you lose you lose your brain cells, right? But anyway, so we tend to breathe shallow and we forget to breathe. We hold our breath. Lots happens. That's not good. When you begin to breathe, and they'll often teach you, again, I would go online, I would figure out people that teach people everything about breathing techniques. But one thing I tell my people is it's called belly breathing. That's when you breathe in, your belly goes out. And when you breathe out, your belly goes in. It's opposite of what you think. But what it's doing is it's actually tricking your body, the physiological part, to believe the threat is over. The threat isn't over. But it tells your body, hey, you don't need to go into full-blown alarm right now. It's okay. So maybe if you get triggered, you start to feel it right away. You just start to breathe so you don't have to go into that state where all your blood begins to move from your brain, to your fight or flight muscles. You can maybe stop it sooner. Your body goes, hey, the threat is done. I don't need all those cortisol hormones released right now, whatever the case may be. I often tell people, if you're in a conversation, to start doing breathing techniques in front of somebody's kind of weird, but you can kind of turn away slightly. And if you've been practicing how to breathe when you're not in conflict or in that situation, you can teach yourself how to do it very subtly when you're in the room with that person. It's one of the most profound techniques to use. I mean, women do it when they're having babies. But we just don't know how to breathe. And I wouldn't try practicing it just when you're in conflict if you haven't learned, because it might be difficult for you. So that's one technique. A lot of it is learning how to do something when you're not in conflict, so that when you're in conflict, you'll be able to better handle it.
Yeah, that's a great idea, because if you don't practice it, then it won't come naturally in the heat of the moment. What is something that a person can do after the conversation has happened and they're no longer in the conversation, but they're reflecting about it and trying to learn from it?
I tell people, spend some time in journaling and learn from your conflicts. Learn when you became triggered. Like at the moment, if you got triggered and you couldn't settle down, you might just want to say something like, hey, I'm kind of up here right now and I'm having a hard time hearing you, and it's important for me to hear you. Let's take a 10-minute break, okay? But I'm going to come back. Okay. And then just disengage. Okay. Don't sit there and just let them have it or let them go at you or whatever the case may be. It's not good for either of you. Okay. More than likely, if you become triggered, they're going to feel it. Right. So also what happens when you become triggered is not only do you have a physiological situation happen with your blood and your hormones and everything else like that, and all those chemicals, you also have a part of your brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala is what releases human emotion. So you might have the emotion of anger being released. It's a chemical. It's a feeling. They can feel it. You can feel it. That's why you can walk in a room and you can feel tension, because they're chemicals released in the atmosphere through your body, because your body said you need to go into fight mode. So I often tell people, if you can learn to understand what messages are coming, you'll feel something first. Sometimes you don't even know what you're thinking. Sometimes you don't know that you're thinking they're disrespectful. You just got angry. So learning about emotions, like healthy ways, like anger is a fight response. What am I fighting for? Frustration is blocked. What's blocking me, or what am I being blocked from? Maybe you're trying to talk to your young adult and they keep cutting you off, or they turn their back on you, or they're rolling their eyes, or whatever the case may be, or they start to attack you, whatever the case may be. Anxiety is you're anticipating some kind of negative consequence, right? Sadness or disappointment means loss. So you feel like you've lost something, right? And happy means something is good. So if you can learn that when you're not in conflict, like pay attention to what happened, you'll start to learn patterns of messages or stories that you've been telling yourself, probably for a long time.
Yes.
You can use them as important pieces of data, right? And that happens for you, but also, do you want me to get into what we can do for them if they become triggered?
Yes.
Okay. So what happens is, so again, I'd say for you, breathe at the moment. That's going to calm you down, but do preparation. Learn how to breathe when you're not in conflict. Learn how to journal the messages that you're sending. Are you in fight mode? What happens to you? What are you believing, right? When they're angry, guess what? Same thing's happening. you have said something to them that their filter has interpreted as a threat or something that's opposing something important to them. Okay. So their blood begins to move and their amygdala is releasing an emotion. So again, if you prepared by understanding how emotions work, when they get really angry, what you want to do is you want to speak to their brain, even if you don't agree with why they got angry, even if you don't agree with what they're saying. What you want to do is acknowledge you're angry. And a lot of people say, well, they're going to say, duh. I'd actually say, no. Like, I really ticked you off right now. And that makes you angry. And I'm trying to hear, what are you fighting for? Not just you're fighting against me, something I said, but what are you fighting for? Usually it's the opposite of what you said. Like, if you immediately, as a mother, we do this, they say something and you give your opinion on it right away. They might want to be heard about how they think about the world. They might feel patronized by you. And they might be fighting for their own respect. That you would respect how they see the world or how they've interpreted things, right? You might not agree, but they want to be heard. So you can say, oh, I just cut you off and gave my opinion again, didn't I? Now that makes you angry. It's important, like, that I actually hear your point of view. And I think I went into mom mode again, and that's kind of what I do. I'm working at it. Something like that, right? But you're going to where they are, speaking to their brain, the emotion that has been released, and acknowledging what's important for them at the moment will help them to diffuse quickly, because they might not have learned the breathing techniques. They might not have been journaling like you have, right?
Right.
So a lot of this takes learning and preparation when you're not in conflict.
Exactly, because that's when you can practice without any pressure. And if you have those skills already developed from your practice time, they're going to come a lot more naturally in the situation. Even the deep breathing that you talked about, you can do that. I mean, somebody might notice that you're deep breathing, but they might not. I mean, it can be pretty subtle that you're just taking deep breaths. So that's really great. And then I really loved your strategy or idea of also just stepping away from the conversation for 5 or 10 minutes and saying, we'll come back to it, because that allows your body to kind of settle down and you can collect your thoughts rather than continuing in a conversation that is going awry. You can maybe prevent some damage by just taking that short little break, as long as you're clear that you're not abandoning the conversation entirely and you're going to come back to it.
Yeah. So important, because a lot of times what we do is we walk out upset or they leave, slamming the door or whatever the case may be, right? And if you can stop it right there. But I will tell you this, is that when you're speaking to them, like if they're really angry, they're going to be up here, right? They're going to be, maybe their voice is going to be raised, and you might have to speak firmly and say, you're really angry about this right now. You can't hear me. I can't hear you, but I think it's important. Let's take a break. And you disengage, right? We're going to come back to it. So, because again, if they're really triggered, they can't hear you very well. And they're just focusing on their issue, just like you would be. See, it's not an easy thing to do.
Michelle, this has been such a great conversation. And I really appreciate everything you talked about in terms of being triggered, because being triggered during a difficult conversation doesn't make a person a bad mother. It doesn't mean that they failed. It means their body and emotions are responding to something that feels painful, threatening, or deeply important to them. And when they begin to understand what's happening inside of them emotionally and physically, then they can begin responding more intentionally instead of reacting automatically. That's what this episode is really about. Not about becoming emotionless, not pretending things don't hurt, but learning how we can stay grounded enough to communicate in a healthier, more peaceful way, even in those really difficult moments. And for everyone who's listening right now, the same is true when your adult child becomes triggered. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay calm enough and breathe right there in the moment to help de-escalate the situation instead of matching the intensity of it. So here's something practical I want you to do this week. Think about one recent conversation that left you feeling really emotionally activated afterward. Maybe you felt anxious. Maybe you were angry. Maybe you replayed the conversation over and over in your mind afterward. Now ask yourself, what exactly triggered me in that moment? What story was I telling myself? What value do I have that I feel was being threatened? What emotion was underneath my reaction? And then think about this. What would it have looked like to slow down, to breathe, and to respond from a more peaceful place instead? That kind of awareness is super powerful because healthier communication often just begins with greater self-awareness of what we're experiencing in the moment. And I think this is really important too. Remember, progress in relationships doesn't happen through just one conversation. It happens through small shifts over time. So just be gentle with yourself as you're learning. Keep bringing your relationships, your emotions, and your conversations before the Lord in prayer, and try practicing the breathing techniques that Michelle and I talked about, and try practicing the journaling about your conversations to learn more about yourself and learn more about what triggers you. And trust that God can help you grow in your wisdom and in your peace and in your self-control, even in the middle of your strained relationships. Hey friend, do you want to join a community of Christian women who are praying for their prodigal or estranged children, just like you are? Inside my Facebook group, Praying Moms of Estranged and Prodigal Adult Children, you'll get prayer tools and scripture-based encouragement to help you trust God with your adult children. Join now at https://bit.ly/prayingmom. Hey, I hope today's episode inspired you. If so, would you click the follow button for the show and share it with someone who wants to learn more about trusting God? Also, please take 30 seconds to leave me a quick review of the show on Apple Podcasts. It means so much to me to know this podcast is encouraging you. Set your alarm to wake up to Jesus and your mocha, and meet me here every Tuesday for a new episode. See you soon! I want to talk to you about two specific groups of these moms who are probably listening. Let's take the first group first. So, as I mentioned before, some of these moms have some level of contact with their children, but they have no idea why their child is really distant emotionally. So, when a parent is in that situation and they have no idea why their child is really distant emotionally, maybe there hasn't been a big argument, the child has just drifted into relative silence or just great distance. How can that mom explore what her adult child needs or wants from the relationship?
Yeah, again, really difficult because we don't know what's caused them to just pull away, right?
Right.
So are we talking about where you actually have some contact, they've just become distant, you're actually connected to them somehow?
Right. So maybe you rarely hear from them. Maybe you hear from them, a few times a year or something, and they seem really distant emotionally when you do talk with them, but they haven't said, I'm upset about this or that. They just seem really distant emotionally. What can
Okay,
a mom do to kind of reach out without applying a lot of pressure?
okay. Yeah, I got to think about that, how they can actually reach out, because I'm thinking more about when we're actually in conversations with them. And usually when people come to me, it's about they're actually talking, but they're fighting.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to teach them how to play in the sandbox nicely together and to create a shared understanding. So you probably are a little bit more of an expert on how do I reach out, if they've been estranged. But let's just imagine that you are trying to rebuild, okay, and they still are
Right.
not talking, okay. You know, we call it the silent treatment, right? So when someone isn't talking much, all we have to go on is what we're seeing with our eyes, right?
Right.
So
What we're experiencing.
we're seeing them maybe be in the room, but they're silent and they're looking down all the time. They've got their arms crossed. You know, they're speaking to us. And by the way, communication, 55% of messages when we're talking comes from our body language. Okay.
Right.
30% of what we say is done with our tone of voice, and only 7% is done with the actual words. So they're talking to you. They're just not talking to you with words. Okay. They're talking to you with nonverbals. So if there's a silent treatment, often if you want to get them to open up, one technique would be just to use descriptive language. Like just simply saying, you know, like I've noticed something's changed. Like in the past, we'd be talking about something's changed because I've noticed that, you seem to be really quiet.
Mhm.
Um, you know, what what's changed for you? That's all you have to say. Don't say, why don't you want to talk to me? And I'll tell you about that in a second here. Why don't you want to talk to me? Why are you not talking to me? Just say, I've noticed that, you're not talking like you used to.
Right.
What's changed?
Right.
What's changed for you?
Right. Or you could say, I've noticed we haven't talked in a while. I wanted to reach out and make sure everything's okay. And
Right, right.
yeah,
Another thing you could say, I've noticed you haven't reached out for a while. What would make it easier for us to connect?
yeah,
Okay. Because
that's great.
what we want to do is we want to start to use some good questions to encourage them. So identifying what you see with your eyes, you're not judging, you're just saying, you're describing what you've noticed, and then you're inviting them to clarify, but you want to do it in such a way that they don't feel interrogated, okay? Because when we ask questions, again, a lot of people ask, close-ended questions like, are you sick? Have you forgotten about us? Are you too busy for your mother? I mean, I don't know what mothers might actually say, but you can be interrogating them. And sometimes when we start a conversation, we go into the conversation almost like a checklist. Because again, we've already formed stories. We're already thinking why they have not done what they've done. And we're just kind of asking questions. Is it this? Is it this? Is it this? And guaranteed they're feeling interrogated and they're going to back off worse, right? So instead, we want to learn how to ask good questions, right? And, did you know that neuroscience and communication research has actually talked about how the way you frame a question will impact the other person's brain differently than using it other ways? And I'll tell you about that. So, for example, if you use the words what And that in your question, it tends to move the other person's brain to more exploring and problem solving.
Yes.
If you use
Yes.
the question, why, it tends to move the person into defensiveness. Okay. They'll start to feel condemned or that. So when you say, why did you do that? Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why have you not called? Why are you not talking to me? Right. Instead, you might want to try what was happening. What was happening for you that led you to that action? Or what's kept you from communicating?
Right.
Or what would make it easier for us to talk?
Right.
Right.
That is definitely better because it keeps the other person from feeling attacked or like they need to be on the defensive.
Right. And it also they'll be kind of surprised because again, when you describe, I've noticed you're not talking, you're coming, you're sitting down, you're kind of quiet. That's not how things used to be. They'll all of a sudden, oh, I am behaving different. They can't argue with that, right? So what would make it easier for you? Or what's kept you from talking? That's all. And they might say nothing.
Yeah.
You might say, okay, it's different though, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. You might
They,
want to wait on it.
in that situation, they at least know that it's on your mind and that it matters to you, which could be a stepping stone to further conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So again, most of the things I'm talking about take a little bit of practice, like learning how to ask good questions, because we tend to just ask closed-ended questions and interrogate them. Because you have to remember, it's what happens in the conversation, we tend to make it all about us. Like, why didn't they phone me back? What I think about their life, my opinion about this, where it's about us. But really listening with the intent to hear and understand will bring a shared understanding. It will build trust with them. It will help to diffuse their emotion because you're telling them that you've been heard. It will help you to explore what's important to them because if they open up, you might hear something that you didn't know about them before, right? It might help to clarify what issues were really causing conflict with you and that person, right? Just by actually doing that. But you have to abandon, your need for you to clarify your stuff and just put on your curious hat for a minute and explore with them. And I often say to people, what will help you maybe a little bit as moms is that, if you are connecting with a person who's not a believer in Christ, you don't sit there and judge them because they don't believe
Right.
what you believe. You don't sit
Right.
there and try to convince them that they're wrong. You don't carry on like that. You actually love them. You try to hear them and you try to build relationship with them, right? With your adult children or prodigals, what I would say is there's a part of their heart that isn't believing. There's a part of their heart, and God doesn't force us. He doesn't force us to believe. He doesn't force us to go along with things. So if you can see that in your child and say, I want to get to know them and love them as they are, even if I don't agree, I want to send them a message that they've been heard and understood, right? And if
Yeah.
you can do that, practice questions, practice, it's an art a little bit, right?
It is.
Not everybody knows how to do that. Practice breathing when you get triggered. Practice those things in advance. Then when you come together, there's a higher probability you're going to have more wins than losses. And you're going to
Right.
rebuild trust. And that'll move you to the next level.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that reminds me of, how important it is to listen. Why is it so hard for us to listen?
Why is it so hard for us to listen? Because I think what goes on is our brain right away picks up on what we should say next. And I think for a mom, again, it's because you have so much that you expect and you want for your kid, et cetera. And you sometimes put yourself in that position. But I'll tell you, when you go into a conversation with, you know, your opinions in advance and you wanting to tell them something and you wanting to solve it right away and you wanting to do this, it's all about you, really. It's kind of selfish. It
Mhm.
really is. It's all about you. It's what you think. Even when you say, I know how you feel, then you're starting to direct the conversation about you. Right now, they don't want to hear about you.
Right.
So,
They just
so
want to be heard and understood.
heard and understood. And you know what? It's so liberating when you don't have to solve a problem. You can just take that off your shoulders. I often say to people, like, when somebody's, if you go like this to a mirror, The mirror's going to go like this back to you. It's not going to go like this back to you. It's not going to add anything. So learning how to mirror what they tell you, don't add your stuff into it. Just try for a minute to say, how good does it feel to be heard and understood? I want to build a shared understanding. It's so much easier than trying to figure things out and fix everything. You're going to actually enjoy it. You might make discoveries, right? Why it's difficult, there's a lot of variables. I don't think we have time all through today to get into all the things that interrupt our ability to hear and listen. But some things we did talk about, like expectations, assumptions, going in with closed-ended questions just to check off your checklist, coming in as the mom with a different set of rules. All of those things contribute to us not listening.
Right. Well, I want to talk before we close about the second group of moms that I brought up earlier. And some of the moms who will be listening to this episode don't have any contact with their adult children. They're completely blocked for whatever reason. And many of them hope for reconciliation in the future. They don't know if that will come. But in those cases, the thought of reopening communication can feel pretty scary. When it comes to, the communication tools that we've talked about, what could those moms do now, even though they don't have any contact with their children? What could they do now to be prepared for when they might have a future conversation with their children, or even in other conversations, even for other conversations in which the stakes feel really high?
Yeah. Well, okay, I will go back to this. What I often say to people is you probably want to learn some basic communication skills when you're not in conflict. Okay. It's kind of like the game of hockey. My dad played really high level hockey. My son was drafted. It was a big deal. And my father used to say to him, you got to learn how to skate first. Everything else comes second, because when you're in that game and it's moving fast and everything's happening at one time, you don't have time to think. You've got to learn how to do some of this stuff a little more automatically. So preparing by understanding triggers, preparing by breathing, practice like in a conversation with people you do have, and they tell you, that person was just, being very rude, and you can hear their anger. Try just reflecting an emotion just in that conversation. Boy, that made you angry. Try to see if you can hear and understand with everyday conversations with people that when you're not in conflict. Practice then, so that when you come with your child and that opportunity is restored, because God is our Redeemer, right? And He's the one that restores all things, and He makes a way where there is no way. But you're doing your part, right? Work on your journaling, work on your triggers, work on understanding, all of that kind of stuff. I would again recommend that if the time does come and you're not sure, I think if it's been extreme estrangement, I probably would recommend a mediator. And that's different than a counselor, okay? So counselors get into why we do what we do, and it's in the weeds, and it's therapy. Mediation isn't therapy. It's very clean. It's very nice. We don't get into that. What you're doing is you're basically, a mediator is taking information from one party, cleaning it off so the person can hear and understand what they said. Then the other person gets to talk. And when you're done, the mediator helps you to come up with a plan. It's very clean. It's not messy. It's very, very safely facilitated. It can clean up expectations. It can clarify assumptions. It can actually tackle, different issues that need to be solved, that can be solved. All of those things come into play. So I think if there was extreme estrangement and your child was willing to actually sit down with you, I probably would recommend a mediator. I don't think I would try and go in alone initially, because I think there's so much water under the bridge. And if you can get a win in one conversation with your child where it's done really in a healthy way, I guarantee you it's going to be a door that's going to open for a whole lot more wins. Okay. So I think that's probably what I would recommend.
Right. Start with the mediator. But in the meantime, now go ahead and start practicing all of these communication tools in other conversations with other people, just as you go about in your daily life, so that when that opportunity comes later and after you've met with a mediator and set up your communication guidelines, that these communication techniques come naturally to you.
Right.
Yeah.
And I will say something too, is that when you start learning communication skills, somebody might just say, what'd you do? Take a course? Because you might sound wooden, because it just feels weird. If you're not used to it, you might feel like it's so formal. You can say, actually, I'm really trying to work on it. Would you work with me here? Right?
Yeah.
I'm really doing my best. Even if you have a conversation with someone where you're used to having conflict with them and they say, "What did you take a course?" Or "Don't pull that psychobabble on me," right? Because they feel like you're getting you're above them. Say, "No, actually, what we did before wasn't working. I'm trying this out. I'm not really good at it yet, but I really want to because I think it might help us," right? So don't be intimidated by people if they try to shut you down because they think you should naturally know how to do this stuff. A doctor or a surgeon had to learn how to practice, practice, practice before they could do what was good, right? So you've got to practice skills so that they become more automatic and easier to do.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Well, before we close this episode, Michelle, what parting words do you have for our listeners?
Well, I think I would have to say to all you moms out there, first of all, that, God sees you, He loves you, and He's so aware of what's taking place. He knows how your heart is broken. As the Father in heaven, he talks about, like we talk about worshiping God. He says, if you have a gift you're worshiping God, leave your gift at the altar and be reconciled. He's so big on reconciliation, and He knows all the water under the bridge. And you're in really good hands with Sarah. She's teaching you how to pray because prayer is really powerful. Learning how to hear from God, to pray as it is in heaven into the situation. He's all about reconciliation. You don't know what He's doing behind the scenes with your kids. You don't know how He's preparing the way for you to have those conversations that are going to be effective. And He wants to heal your heart. He wants to heal your child's heart. He's for family and He's for you. And so there is hope. I know it's painful, but I want to say there is hope. And I just really believe that God's going to make a way for you.
Yes, absolutely. God is all about restoration. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Michelle, for being on the show today. And I know that my audience is just going to really appreciate everything we've talked about today.
Oh, it was great. I'm so glad that I could be a part of it. And I love your topic. As I mentioned, I've got others waiting to hear all about what you have to bring to the table as well, too, because it's a very real subject right now that's happening for lots and lots of families. And I'm glad that we're talking about it. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so we'll stop recording there.